Hey, what's going on, everyone? Thanks for tuning into the podcast, YouTube channel, whatever you're choosing to listen to us from. I got one of my buddies, Nick, here, who I met through one of my closest friends, one of our closest friends, Edwin Arster, who's an amazing human being. And yeah, Nick and I have more recently had we went to the Summit of Greatness in Columbus, Ohio. So I got to know him better. He's also my accountant, and he's currently a partner at it's Boscia and Boscia.
Yep.
Yep. And yeah, welcome, Nick. Glad to have you on here.
Yeah. Glad to be here too.
Yeah, man. So, I know when we first met at the Jack Canfield event a while back, that was like the first time like getting to know you. But yeah, would love to learn a little bit more about and one of the things I learned from Tony Robbins when I was in Fiji for wealth mastery was about like tax efficiency. So
Hmm.
I should have Nick on. Like that'd be great just to talk about it, right? Because it's one of those things that at least for me, like I know nothing about. But Tony Robbins, it was one of the tenets, like the 10 tenets of financial mastery. So I
Hmm.
thought you'd be like the perfect person to talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, exactly. So yeah, they say taxes are going to be like your biggest expense essentially. Like on
Mm.
average, people are paying, say, 30% in taxes. So, if you're making
Yeah.
100,000, 30% is 30,000. So that's usually people's biggest expense. So
Mm.
not that, you can't avoid tax, but you could minimize your taxes. So that's why, working with an accountant, not everyone's tax situation, they have the option to lower their taxes, but a simple scenario would be, the average person's working as a W-2 employee. They pay taxes on all their earned income, but one of the deferrals they could do is contribute money to their 401k. So if you contribute up to I think this year's the max is now 20,500.
Yeah.
You could contribute that, and you basically, if you hypothetically are making 100,000, you subtract off the 20, so you're only paying tax on 80,000, and then that retirement grows tax deferred. So someday when you're older, you take that money out, and that minimizes your taxes now. You kind of pay it later. So that's a tax strategy for
Mm.
I'd say the average person, because that's a more common situation. And then there's so many complex situations. So yeah, minimizing taxes is my, let's say, specialty. It depends on the situation of the client, though.
Yeah, yeah. And I also noticed, I'm not sure if you've noticed a trend in more W-2 employees having like a side hustle since the
Hmm.
pandemic has happened. Do you think that's been more common in your experience?
Yeah, yeah, and I definitely think it is because people have been working remote, so now people aren't going to the office, so it might free them up with time and not having to commute an hour each way. So now they have two
Mm.
extra hours a day, or
Right.
they're maybe not super passionate about their job anymore, and they're trying to branch off into something they're more passionate about, and now they're starting up their side hustle. And a lot of my clients, their goal is for their side hustle to overtake their W-2 job, and now they leave their old
Mm.
job and now they could spend 40 plus hours on their new job, or a
Mm.
flex schedule is what a lot of people want. So there's a lot more tax advantages to owning your own business. If you have a side hustle, essentially you own your own business, whether
Yeah.
you're being a life coach and you're training people and you're getting paid that way. If you want to open up a barber shop, you're cutting hair, you're making money that way. It's really, you make your schedule, you're advertising, you're doing all these things, but all those expenses that you have to pay out are going to be business deductions. So, like in the simplest term, because a lot of people get confused of what's a write off, this and that. In the sense, if you run your own business and you now want to make your side hustle your main career path, is you get paid, let's just say, $100,000 for doing services, whatever, or selling products. Anything that you have to pay out of pocket are expenses. So on the 100,000, if you have 40,000 in expenses, advertising, products, um, setting up a website, things like that. Now you only pay tax on the net, the 60,000. So
Mm.
that's what sometimes people get confused because they don't realize what's a write off. And,
Mm.
often the misconception is people want to write off expenses when they don't have a business. So
Right.
if you're an employee, like let's say you work for me and you were a staff accountant here, you wouldn't have any business expenses because you're an
Right.
employee. So I, as the employer, should cover your expenses. Oh, you need a laptop, I'll pay for it because my business could write off the expense. But you as the
Mhm.
employee really can't write off the expense. And that tax law changed back in 2018.
Uh,
So, taxes are confusing because constantly when there's a new president, there's new tax
mm,
laws and tax changes. So it's constantly changing. Where like years ago, you could write off home office
mm,
expenses even if you were an employee, but
mm.
now you can't do that anymore. So, it's a common misconception, but yeah, and I think going the route of doing your passion is, works out for a lot of people, but I always kind of warn people that it is riskier in the sense
Mhm.
that, you know, you could be working in this business and not, sometimes people aren't really paying attention to the numbers. They're doing what
Mhm.
they love and they don't realize, oh my
Mm.
God, I've been doing this business, all this money's coming in, but I'm
Yeah.
actually spending more than what I'm
Mm.
making. And at the end of the year, they're negative 20,000. Like, oh my God, I
Right.
didn't even realize. So
Mm.
that's something to keep in mind too when people are thinking about going down that route. You have to kind of be pretty good with numbers and things like that, or have someone to help you.
So it sounds like, yes, it's good to have a passion, right? But ultimately still business at the end of the day, right? So at the end of the day, you could be making 1 million, but if you're spending 1.1 million, right, you're still, losing money, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting. So have you noticed that when should someone, I mean, I guess it's not as easy as like, oh, I'm making this much, I should quit my job, but like I'm sure most people would prefer to have a side hustle that even if you make 20,000 less, like it probably still makes more sense to do that, right? The one, because of the tax deductions, and two, because like you actually love what you do, right?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. And you're right though. That's like something I really couldn't give like my advice on because there's no blanket answer. So if I
Right.
was talking to you, like when I'm talking to my client, I'm having one-on-one, I could get into what's really important to them and kind of,
Mm,
guide them because a lot of it's on the client.
yeah.
Maybe you would be happy to make 20,000 less and do something you absolutely love, where someone
Right.
else might not. Someone else might
Mhm.
want be like, I want to become partner in a corporate career where if they work their butt off for 10 years they're kind of on a fast track to knowing at some point they're going to make a large salary, and some
Mhm.
people are willing to do that because it's a more guarantee where a business
Mhm.
isn't a guarantee. Like think about
Mhm.
COVID. COVID, no, everyone, the hardest thing I've seen is someone finally gets their money together, wants to buy a business, they put that deposit down, they sign that lease, and then 2 weeks later there's a lockdown. So there is no guarantee. So like
Mhm.
running a business is riskier in that sense. So
Mhm.
a lot of businesses didn't make it through COVID.
Right.
So but like now they say everything is just a cycle. So like now things maybe
Mm.
bottomed out, maybe not, but
Mm.
people are starting to start businesses now and now hoping that everything's going to come back to normal, and it's a
Mhm.
great time where you could start at a bad time and then it's
Mm.
it's tougher to get, the ball rolling.
So it sounds like obviously there's risks associated with starting a business. Like, why do you think so many businesses fail like in the first 5 years? Is it because like they're just not good with numbers, or they don't have the right partners, or they're just not business minded? Have you noticed some
Hmm.
trends with the ones that maybe haven't quite made it past year five or even the first couple of years?
Usually a lot. So our specialty is where we work on a lot of small businesses. So like a lot of our clients most of our clients are individual taxes because every person really has to file their tax return. And then a
Mm.
lot of our clients end up starting their own businesses, small businesses, usually family owned,
Mm.
one or two partners, maybe 4 to 5 employees. So nothing huge, but that's really
Mhm.
our bread and butter, say. And I
Mm.
feel like that type of business is the owner really has to be involved in the business. Like a lot of our businesses that have been around for 20 plus years, the owner's there every
Mm.
day working, or they have really good managers that they could rely on. But then
Mm.
that comes down to the point of, let's say you hire a great manager to run your let's say your restaurant,
Mhm.
they usually will require bigger salary. So it's always
Mm.
like that you make those decisions as a business owner. Do you want to do everything yourself? Because you're going to be usually as the owner, you're going to be the most efficient.
Mm.
You're going to get the most done in the least time. But if you hire someone, you're gonna have to pay them a pretty good salary, and that kind of cuts from your bottom line. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like things like that, there's no, as I said, there's no like general answer for everyone as a blanket, but I think,
Right.
the owner being involved
Huh.
makes the biggest difference of success.
Ah.
Because a lot of people want to start a business and have someone else run it, and then
Huh.
usually sometimes it doesn't work out as planned, or they're not
Uh,
making enough money, things like that, or
huh.
just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Like for example, like I was actually talking about this the other day. There was the fad of the frozen yogurt places
Oh yeah.
that just like, it was just an example I happened to be talking about the other day, and it was
Yeah.
blowing up and everyone wanted to do
At
it,
one
and then
point, yeah.
people were coming late to the bandwagon, and they were
Mm,
investing all this money, and then it leveled out. Like people thought it was
right.
just keep going up, and it kind of just stopped, and a lot
Yeah.
of clients didn't really make it because they were kind of late to the game
Mm,
type of deal. So where other
mm,
clients are the opposite, they get the right place at the right time, and they're like, oh my god, I got into this industry at the perfect time, and now it's
mm.
booming. You know, so doing your research and things like that. But I think the passion is important. It's hard to do a job every day and do it really well if you're not interested in it or you don't
Mm.
like it. Like I don't think an accountant would do a great job if you didn't really like working with numbers all the time. You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. I'm also hearing the importance of timing and everything, right? Especially in business, but it really like the macro conditions are probably more important than people think, right? In terms of like,
hmm
am I an early adopter? Is this a market that's like already proven? Like, am I starting a new market? Sometimes that can be challenging, obviously.
Yeah. And it's funny because obviously me and you both know Tony Robbins and his teachings, and you went to business
Yeah.
mastery, right?
Mm-hmm.
So business mastery is like the perfect example of anyone could go there and kind of learn, I think was it the 10 master steps. It's like it's more of the psychology of the business owner
Mm,
because if something's not working and you're a smart business owner, you're going to try something new.
mm,
So some people who aren't willing to to
mm.
pivot when things aren't working or try
Ah,
something new or do advertising. Oh, Instagram's not working. Maybe you have to do things on YouTube or,
mm,
Facebook. What's my clientele? It's like always trying to, like even my business, our dad started it like almost 50 years ago. He's retired since. And then me and my brother have been, growing it, and we've been trying new avenues. Some of our
huh,
advertising tactics were great and some weren't as great. So we
mm,
just, we're constantly trying to improve the business. I think that's the most important factor for a business to succeed is the business owner willing to try new things and
mm.
learn. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah, that's a good point, right? Like there's folks that are always agile, like adaptability, especially in today's age, right? Like I think
mhm,
if it's anything the last 3 years have taught us is that like things change pretty rapidly. So like yeah, like you said, right? Like Instagram ads might be hot now, but like TikTok is probably pretty big, you know what I
mhm,
mean? Like we think Amazon is this huge behemoth, right? But we thought Blockbuster was big at one point too, or we thought,
mhm.
so the
Yeah,
things just change pretty rapidly. So that's a good point. Like just, you can't ever rest on your laurels, it sounds like.
yeah, yeah. And like I think it's typical in like the accounting industry is a lot of most accountants. I think the stats are like 75% of accountants today are already at age 65 or older. So they're
Oh
like
wow.
more closer to retirement.
Hmm.
But that the generations typically, and this is not everyone, but most of the time, as you're older, you're less willing to change with new technologies and new things like that.
Hmm.
So adapting, especially with COVID, we set up like a secure portal where we
Oh
could
yeah.
upload all our tax documents
Yeah.
because we didn't want people coming to the office. You at that point
Hmm.
you couldn't. So
Yeah.
some people weren't able to pivot and change and use technology. So like I think, I'm 33 and there's kids who are 21 out of college who are probably better at the technology than me. So how do
Hmm.
I get, maybe have pick their brains
Hmm.
and learn from them? Because if I like, there's constantly new technology. So I think things like that are important to make your business survive and thrive.
Hmm.
So
Yes. So you've clearly have invested a lot in personal development and business mastery and all these different courses. Like, how do you quantify the ROI on those things? Right? Because that's one of the
Hmm.
questions I get asked a lot. Because they're like, "Oh, Davidson, why'd you spend $20,000 on Tony Robbins courses?" And sometimes I'm
Yeah,
like, "Well, I got an ROI," but they're like, how would you quantify that? I'm like, honestly, sometimes it's hard to really
yeah,
say because it's like very holistic.
yeah, I agree. I don't actually know how you'd be able to quantify the ROI because you would have to figure what would be your business growth without it, which it
Right.
would be hard to do, and
Yeah.
then you have to calculate your actual business growth. So it'd be,
Right.
but but even if you just did it, what your business growth that was versus the year
Mm.
prior might be a
Yeah.
good way to analyze it. But I
Yeah.
also think the the Tony Robbins and the self development is more than just ROI because
Right.
that's just a return on your investment monetarily. But there's
Mm.
certain things that you operate your business differently. Maybe that's making you happier, or
Mm.
maybe make you have more passion, or maybe
Mm.
working less hours. How do you
Right.
value those? You
Right.
know, so those are factors that I think are beyond the ROI that
Mm.
only could work per person. Like for me, there's some of the things I learned was like, oh, I really enjoy adding more value to my clients. And so
Mm.
we hired more staff so that frees up my time to
Mm.
spend more time in meetings or doing a podcast. When I was so busy, I would be like, oh, I can't get on the podcast. I'm too busy getting the
Right.
work done. So now I have more
Right.
time to do things that I'm adding value to clients, giving
Mm.
more back and sharing my knowledge. So those are
Mm.
things that I can't put a price on, but
Mm.
those are things that I learned that I think are the bigger and more important things where I might, if I didn't go to a self-development event, maybe I would just think like, oh, money, 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 and
Mm.
not think about the other parts of life that are also
I
important.
I love that, right? I think, most people think of an accountant and they probably don't think, oh, like Nick's gonna help me be able to prioritize my values and spend more time with the family and stuff like that. So it's cool
Hmm.
that you're taking a holistic approach. And also I love how you quantify a lot of things in life, right? Like you're like, oh, how do I measure my happiness at any given point? Or how do I measure how much free time I have for hobbies? Like, do I have time for
Hmm.
travel? Like that's cool. It sounds like you're very like cognizant of like
Yeah.
where you want to be. And then because you can measure it, you can ultimately like make a change or you can continue to invest in that, whatever thing that makes you happy.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because like for me, my passion, I love traveling. So like I want to travel,
Yeah.
go everywhere. And like before in 2019 is when I did all Tony Robbins, like the whole mastery. I was going to Fiji here, there, and
Yeah.
everything. And it was great. And then COVID happened and tax season got extended to July 15th
Oh
and
yeah.
all these new laws. So like I was working nonstop. I took no vacation days. Like
Huh.
that year of COVID, I didn't take a vacation day till August. So basically I was
Wow.
working like weekends. It was nuts, but it's
Huh.
like sometimes you have to go through the tough stuff, and
Uh,
like I overcame it. And like this year I took like I think 32 days off for
mm.
vacation, and my goal for this upcoming year is to take 40 days off.
Oh,
So like
nice.
that's like
Yeah.
my passion. Like I want to where that's the advantage of having your own business is like I get like there's definitely times I have to work really hard and I have to go and work on Saturday and work
Mm.
late, probably like most people,
Right.
but then I have that flexibility. All right, I've hit this deadline, and then the next week I could take a vacation.
Mm.
So like things
Yeah.
like that, that drives me to wanna constantly improve systems and
Mm.
procedures and train staff and different things like that.
I love that. And I'm sure not everyone knows like what Tony Robbins is or ultimate mastery, but if you could, we could probably do a whole episode just on the takeaways from that, right? But I guess big picture, 30,000 foot view, like what would you say some of your takeaways are even a few years after you've completed all that?
I think the biggest takeaway, so basically, like in a nutshell, I think the the mastery you was basically like figuring out learning about yourself. Like, what do I
Mm-hmm.
really love? What do I want my
Mm-hmm.
future to be? What would my dream life be? And
Mm-hmm.
like, all right, now this is the dream life I want to have. How am I going to get there? So not
Right.
like you're going to get there tomorrow, but kind of gave me a goal of what I'm setting
Mm.
out for. And I think what the biggest takeaway was like I did that years ago, and every day working, 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 striving towards that, making vision boards, doing other self-development stuff. It's like you realize in the
Mm.
beginning the results are very little,
Mm.
but over the long term the results are
Uh,
like it's like exponential, I think.
huh.
So like the first
Yeah.
year you're going to go and you're going to get excited and motivated and you realize, oh my God, I'm working really hard. I'm not getting a lot of results. But
Mm.
then one
Huh.
year goes by and then another year goes by and you're like, oh my God,
Uh,
the results are happening faster than I thought in the
right.
once 3-4 years go by.
Huh.
So then that I think that's the cool part for me personally. Like obviously
Mm.
there's tons of people who, could just like, get motivated and make huge things happen year one and just crush it. But, for me, I've
Huh.
been constantly working and now like I'm seeing a lot of the, let's say fruits from my labor over all those
Right.
years.
It sounds like similar to like compound interest, right? It's like you don't think
Exactly.
like, the 10% adds up, right? But then once you see like, oh, it's like $1 million, but
Yeah,
you wouldn't think that. But then yeah, it just continue. That's cool,
exactly.
man. And
Yeah.
I know we went to the Summit of Greatness together. Like, what were some of the takeaways from attending that conference in Columbus, like the one that Lewis Howes hosted?
I think that my biggest takeaway for that one was just was networking with the right people. When I say networking,
Mm.
just like being around people who are like inspiring as well in their own
Mm.
way. Like everyone we hung out with and met there, all
Yeah.
I was curious what people's goals are and dreams, and
Uh,
everyone I felt was completely different. But it was
yeah.
nice to be around people who were like, "Oh, this is what I really want. This gets me excited."
Yeah.
And being around people who are, positive, happy,
Mm.
inspirational, it just helps. It's like having that good environment, and it kind of
Yeah.
pushes you to go further. Where like on a
Yeah.
typical day, let's say a lot of people could be around people who may be negative and don't believe that their goals are possible and are
Mm.
living paycheck to paycheck. So when you're around
Mm.
that, you don't think things are possible. When you're around
Mm.
people who are all inspired, you realize like, oh,
Ah,
you feel like anything's possible. That's what I
I
think.
love
So like
that.
I
Yeah.
like being around people like you who like, always so nice to everybody and just doing those good things is like the law of
Mm.
attraction. Like you're
Mm.
positive, thinking positive, and then it comes to you.
Yeah, that's a really good takeaway. Yeah, I love it because you're right. We were definitely vibing off of each other's like energies.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
like you said, like because we were all laughing, smiling, having a good time, like it kept building on it. And then, it
Yeah.
was just like good times. Like, yeah, that's good stuff, man. Cause like me and you both go to a lot of these conferences and people are like,
Hmm.
oh, like why do you keep going? Right. But like you said, like every year there's like other goals and other things that you want to experience, right? Like, oh, maybe
Exactly.
I haven't been to Italy yet and I want to do that. And when you're surrounded with people who are also like traveling the world, doing cool things and like, they have like exciting visions, like it makes you think, oh, I've never been to like Naples. Like let me add that to my list as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you
Yeah.
hear someone's goals and might be like, oh my God, I want to do that too. Or maybe you realize someone's goals are totally different, but they're excited and
Mhm.
it kind of gets you
Yeah.
excited.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah, and it makes
that's
you appreciate like the variety of different people and that there's like not one way to like everyone has their end goal. Everyone has their things that fulfill them. So
hmm. Yeah, and that's why I love like the secret and the law of attraction. But it's like they say like everyone could have everything they want because everyone doesn't want the same thing. It's not like everyone
mm,
wants a Lamborghini or everyone wants to be a billionaire. Some people
yeah.
don't want those things, and like I think the worst thing is to chase a goal that maybe your parents instilled on you or
Mm,
your wife instills on you. Like you really have to
mm.
think what is your goal. So I think that's why I'm constantly working on because some of my goals 5 years ago are different than my goals now, you
Right.
know?
Right.
So I think it's a constant, you're always growing. So like if you, I could never see myself stop doing things like
Mm,
that. I even like
yeah.
now, like I signed up for a lot of like CPA conferences they have all over the country. So it's
Hmm.
kind of like in my head, like self-development in the accounting industry and meeting other
Right.
people who are older than me and more seasoned and they've been through some of my pain points and they could give me
Mm,
advice and just being
mm,
around that environment of people. So if someone's willing to
mm.
pay and spend time, money, energy to go to these events, like those
Right.
are people who I enjoy being around, you
Right.
know?
Yeah,
So
they're not settling for average, mediocre, right? They're pushing, the challenging, maybe the status quo, or maybe they have a more efficient way of doing things, right? Or maybe
exactly.
they've gone through like they make you think about your values, like, oh, I thought I wanted this, but after speaking to them, like it sounds like having like time, having a lot of time to travel actually is more important than I thought, you know,
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
like that. That's
Yeah.
cool,
So
man. Well, yeah, thanks, Nick. You know, I always love being in your energy, and I'm so happy that, you know, your business is growing. Obviously, you're doing really cool things, and you know, you're a humble dude. And yeah, man, can't wait to yeah, till we hang out sometime. Next
yeah.
time we hang out.
Yeah. Yeah. And if we have any more conferences to go to, let me know. You know, I'm always in.
Touche. All
All
right,
right.
brother. Take care.
All right. Good talking to you. Have a good one.
You too. All right.
Bye.